Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Kalayim, Perek Zayin, Halacha Gimel, Halacha Daled, and Halacha Hey. We're learning today Daf Samach Hey. We left off on Daf Samach Hey, Amid Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amid at the beginning of the line, Hamasakech, Yefanoi, Shal Chaveroi, Algab Tvuase Shal Chaveroi. Before we continue, I want to go back to the final case that we learned on top of the Amid, the case regarding one who's spreading a grapevine of his fellow over his grain. And the Gemara said there that Lakula Alma, his grain will become Aser, right? Because the grain, which is the Oyser, let's remember what we learned yesterday, is his. That's what we learned. What we didn't speak out is, what about the grapevine? Now, one second, what's even the question? I mean, we are learning the sugya according to Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon that ein adam mekadosh davar she'ein shaloi. Why would the fellow's grapevine become aser? Because we already quoted the Tosfos in Yavamis and Bavli that even with Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon, it's not a hard and fast rule that never ever ein adam mekadosh davar she'ein shaloi. I gave my example of basar v'chalov, and according to many Rishonim, when biyodayim, when the fellow's item is physically being touched by my prohibited act, then I do have the capacity to aser. So if I take my fellow's grapevine and I put it over my grain, not only will my grain become aser, but according to many Rishonim, the grapevine will also become aser because I physically handled it. The Rambam doesn't hold that way. The Rambam holds that since the grapevine is not mine, yes, mine will become aser. Don't forget, the grain is the oiser, but the grapevine, let Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon, which is how the Rambam paskins, will not become aser. Okay, I just wanted to put it out there. That's a very good machlokes rishonim. And now, what are we going to start today? So what we learned yesterday, both the case in the Mishnah and the case that we just mentioned now, one of the 2 items belong to me. The perpetrator either owns the grapevine that he's putting over his fellow's grain, or the perpetrator, meaning the person who's doing the act of kalayim, owns the grain and is bringing the grapevine over his grain. Now the question will be, what were to happen if not the grapevine nor the grain belongs to the perpetrator? Will that make a difference? Will we say that maybe even the Tanakama, which we know now is Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir, that they hold that yes, Adam could be mekadosh davar she'ein shaloi. Maybe they only say that when at least one of the 2 items belongs to him. So since his becomes aser, if his becomes aser, the fellow's becomes aser. Maybe if none of it belongs to him, maybe not. That will be the first discussion that we will have. That's going to go all the way up until the new halacha. Now halacha daled and daf samachei amad aleph, very similar to what we learned yesterday, that a big part of our learning was not kalayim related. A big part of today's daf will be about the laws of Yush, the laws of ownership. The case the Mishnah will give is that if you have a person who robbed a ganef, an anos, someone who forcefully pushed someone out of their land. So let's say Reuven is the owner, Shimon, the strong man, kicked Reuven out. And while Shimon was there, he planted kalayim. Let's go with the shita that ein adam oiser davar she'ein shaloi. So it's not the robbers, so he won't affect an isur. What happened?
What about ein karka nigzelet?
Very good, shkoyach. That's my whole point. Actually, Yakir, if karka would be nigzeles, then it would belong to the robber. Once it belongs to the robber, then if the robber plants kalayim, it will become kalayim. It's shaloi. B'diuk. So we have a rule, ein karka nigzeles. Guys, we're going to speak out another important rule. Whenever Yush is effective, remember this rule. Yush is only has an effect if the item is outside the domain of the owner. So for example, if I lose my watch on the street, and when I discovered that I lost it, right? Or Lashitas Yush, Shaloi Midas is also Yush, or whichever your opinion you're going to take. Ooh, I gave up hope of retrieving my watch. Indeed, my watch now is ownerless. If my watch is in my house, under my bed, and I have Yush because I thought I lost it on the street, Yush won't have any effect. Yush only has an effect when something leaves my domain. Now, the reason why Yush does not have an effect on real estate is exactly what Yakir said, is because since Karka ein an exelis, which means it always remains in the domain of the original owner. So even if the owner gives up hope of ever getting it out of the strongman, the robber, the ganav, the anos, it's in his domain. It is his domain. Our Mishnah is going to be mechader something over here, that there is a certain point where even though there is the general rule that ein karka nixeles, and the point of time will be when everyone forgets to associate the land with the real owner. Interesting concept. So if Reuven owns land and Shimon kicks him out, everyone knows Shimon kicked him out. But at some point in time, people can forget about it. If and when that happens, no longer do people remember this is really Reuven's. Then we do consider the land having left the domain of Reuven. Then if there is Yush, Yush will actually make it belong to the Ganef, to the robber Shimon. And now that it belongs to Shimon, if Shimon is going to be Makayim, that which is in the field, which is Kalayim, it will become Kalayim. Because now it's his. That will be more or less the sugya of Halacha Dalit. And in Halacha Hey, we're going to have more about a grain that has a grapevine over it. Now, by the grapevine, look at the difference. By the grapevine, I don't care what part of the grapevine is hanging over the grain. Any part of it, the main part of it, a secondary, an offshoot of it, any part of the grapevine over the grain creates the Isur of Kalayim. But the grain has to have the stalk under the grapevine. If the stalk is on the side, but because of the grain being very skinny and tall and bendable, the edge of it bends to the side and the tip is under the grapevine. The ikid of the grain is not under the grapevine. We're going to see it's not going to affect Isur Kalayim. That will be basically the sugya of Halacha Hey. We'll leave it at that and let's right away hit inside. Let's go inside. Okay, that's Samachay Amadal of 3 lines from the top. So now the Gemara says, and the Gemara's kasha is on, like we said, even the Tanakama who holds that yes, Adam Mikadosh Davar She'ena Shaloi, but the case the Mishnah gave was that a person extended his grapevine over his fellow's grain, and the Tanakama holds the fellow's grain becomes usher. Don't forget, his grapevine is his. What's going to happen if none, not this nor that, is his? So you have two neighbors. One has a kerem, one has a standing grain. They planted it kedasu kedin. Comes a third person and he mixes in, and he takes the grapevine of one and he puts it over the other. Now none of it belongs to him. Look inside the maraful, the second, third line from the top of the Amid. Mahu says the maraful. Perhaps only because of one of the two, either the grapevine, case of the mission, or the grain, the case that the Gemara just spoke out, that we just quoted again. There, in other words, the one side of this inquiry is based on a premise that maybe the Tanakama agrees in principle to Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon. Maybe they agree in principle, you can't render someone else's items prohibited. Eloma, since yours you could, so when you are making your part asur, Mela drags along chaveiroi. But if none of them are yours, Masha'en kenim hakol shel chaveiroi, mahu. Is fidule the Tanakama nami diyachol lesser. That's the question on Lashitas Tanakama. So the Gemara says, I have an answer for you from our Mishnah itself. Nashme'ina min hadal. I'll prove it to you from our Mishnah. Now, if you remember the Mishnah, Halacha Gimel, the Mishnah quoted the story, the big agadah that we have over here. And the story of the Mishnah was right after the Mishnah says the sheet of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yossi wants to prove that he's right. So what did he say? That my Rabbi Yossi, my story. I'm reading the Mishnah. Someone planted his vineyard on the Shemitah year. The Shemitah year, we explained, even though it's yours, yeah, the land is yours, the vines are yours, the product, the grapes are not yours. And what did he do? He planted in the vineyard, he planted the grain. And when this came in front of Rabbi Akiva says, it's not Asur Bahana. We mentioned there are other issues, not Kalayim. Now, think about it, guys. Just like Shemitah is mafkir the grapes, Shemitah is mafkir the grain. That means that Rabbi Yossi brought a story from a case where nothing belonged to the perpetrator. If the Tanakama would also agree that if nothing belongs to the perpetrator, nothing happens, there is no Isur Hana, then how does Rabbi Yossi bring a raya from this story to back up his opinion when the Tanakama agrees with the story? You know, the story that the Mishnah brings is in the context. There's a machlokes Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. So I'm Rabbi Yossi, I have a Maisa that I'm right. If the Tanakama agrees in the case of the Maisa, what brings to a Maisa? So that's the proof that the Tanakama will hold that even in the case of the Maisa, a person could be Mekadosh Davar, even if none of them are Shaloi. Beautiful. Let's read it inside. I'm reading inside the Gemara now. Now, behold, now says the Gemara, Hare, in the story, in the case of Shemitah, yeah, Shemitah's mafkir the geffen, so Shemitah's mafkir the grain. Ein ha-geffen shaloi, and also the ein ha-tfua shaloi. And nevertheless, Rabbi Yossi is using the story, the itas bas, he's using the story to prove the Tanakama wrong. If the Tanakama agrees with this case of the story, the Tanakama only disagrees because one of the two items belongs to the perpetrator, then the whole story doesn't belong in the Mishnah. So that's a proof that the Tanakama holds that yes, Adam Mekadosh Davar She'ena Shaloi, even if not this nor that, not the geffen nor the grain, belongs to the perpetrator. Gavaldik. And now let's open up the next halacha dal. The expression of a anos we have in Gittin, we have in other places. In other words, the reality of one, you see, robbing, you have Geneva, you have Gezela, and anos is a strong man. And anos is specifically used, and it makes sense for it to be used when land is being robbed, because only a strong man can do it. So if a guy picks your pocket, committing the Brazilians, you don't even know who stole from you. He got away with it. But if someone goes into your house, you can't take your house away. Your house is where it always was, where it's always going to be. It's your property, right? Karka and exelis. So how did he even manage to do it? Because the robber is a strong man. And even though you have the legal, in other words, that's the mitzias. So we're calling this type of robber a mafioso, a person who with his own koyach can go against the law. So that's also just the case.
Certain governments.
Or governments or the Nazis or the Polacks after the war, they just stayed on the property of the Yidden. They stronged us out of it. So you have a robber. We're going to call him just, I know Shimon is a big tzaddik. We just to give names, Yiddish names. We'll call him, I know Rabbi Tabit, Jimmy. So Reuven owns the land and Jimmy is the anos. Sounds better. Now, ha'anos shezara sakerim. But Jimmy is a Yid. Now, he went ahead and he planted the vineyard with grain. And again, we're speaking about the topic, guys, this whole Mishnah is Lashita that ein Adam Mekadosh Davar She'ena Shaloi. According to the Tanakama, that a person could be Mekadosh Davar She'ena Shaloi, and as the Gemara just concluded, even if nothing belongs to him, stop. So then, yeah, if the robber is a Jew, if Jimmy is a Jew, and he pushed the owner out, and he sowed that field with grain, a vineyard, of course it's Kalayim. He was Mekadosh Davar She'ena Shaloi. Our Mishnah is going according to the opinion that you cannot be Mekadosh Davar She'ena Shaloi. So when he planted it, because of the rule that Karka Ein an Exelis, first of all, when he planted it, nothing happened. Case number one in the Mishnah is V'yatzim Ilafanav. V'yatzim Ilafanav means that however it happened, the original owner took it back in his own possession. Okay, Jimmy did tshuva. But 1 second. Now there's an issue of the owner, if he doesn't uproot it, is being mekayim that which is. Exactly. So says the Mishnah that now that once he knows what happened, once he has the ability to uproot it, and remember that the issur of mekayim, of maintaining, is there has to be knowledge and there has to be his willingness for it to be there for you to have a problem once it hits the 200th. The moment he doesn't want it to be there, right? Then he can.
Rabbi, is there a time frame for Mekayim?
Yes. Meaning, from when he finds out, we learned before, then if he's negligent, we begin counting the time that it takes to grow to 200. The case of the Mishnah is beautiful. I forgot in the intro. Guys, Cholamayit, I want to be kitzed. In Hilchas Cholamayit, we have first of all a big machlokes rishonim, just be kitzed, whether the issur of working is midoraisa or midrabanan. Machlokes, big machlokes. One thing is clear when we learned the sugya in Bavli is that whether it's deraisa or derabanan, it's not a hard and fast rule that you cannot work. There are 5 hetadim that are needed. If you have any one of the 5, then you could do work even on Cholamayit. Let's see if I remember. What are the 5? Davar ha'avud, that's the one connected to over here. Davar ha'avud means that if you won't do the work, you're going to have a lot of loss. There's something will get lost. Number 2 is sarchei rabim. Number 3 is sarchei yachid, that doesn't need a maisa uman. Number 4 is kol sarchei hamayid. That's why we go with our kids, the good parents, to whatever mishagas they want to go on Cholamayit, and you take a car, because it's sarchei hamayid. And number 5, if a person, God forbid, is so impoverished that they have no money to buy food, whether for Cholamayit or even for the last days of Yontiv, then any work that will bring you that income, you're allowed to do. But let me go to the Davar Ha'av. So here he gets it back on Cholamayit. Normally, harvesting, one of the malachas, without any hetadim, will not be allowed to be done on Cholamayit. So says the Mishnah, you are allowed to harvest it even on Cholamayit. Now, what's amazing, we just mentioned there's a machlokes rishonim, whether is it midoraisa, you cannot work, but there are 5 hetadim, or midrabanan, you cannot work without the 5 hetadim. Look in the Mara Fulda, 14 lines from the top of the Amid. It's 3 lines in the Mishnah. So he writes 2 approaches. You'll see clearly, one is if it's only midrabanan, and one if it's for deraisa. The first is only if it's midrabanan. You'll see. Now, the question he's asking is that why are you allowed to harvest it on Cholamayit? It's not a davar ha'avud. Why is it not a davar ha'avud? Because since there's a rule, she'ein adam oiser davar she'ein shaloi. In other words, when the anos planted, nothing happened. We just mentioned that mikayim, right, yakir, means that when I, the owner, become aware there's a problem, if I'm negligent and I don't rip it out, then you begin counting down for the 200s. I'm not negligent if I don't harvest it on Cholamayit. I'm not allowed to do it on Cholamayit.
Yeah, but the question, I remember the 200. The question is, what if you have prior task that you have to get to before reaching to the...
Prior means that really the moment I discover that it's there, I'm not allowed to be negligent. So if we learned in the Mishnah that if I am the worker and I'm going in a systematic way to harvest my field, I don't have to jump the rows. I'm allowed to say, when I'll get there, I'll uproot it. In other words, I have to demonstrate I'm not leaving it because I don't care. So the question now will be, so me not harvesting the kalayim on Cholamayit doesn't mean I don't care. I'm not allowed to work on Cholamayit. And therefore, it should not become usher. Because I wasn't negligent. I just didn't do it because I'm not allowed to do it. Like if I get my field back on Shabbos, it never will become kalayim because I'm not allowed to harvest it on Shabbos. It's one of the melachas Shabbos. So that's the kasha of the Marafulda. So he gives 2 answers, and yes, Lad.
Question: You use 2 different words. What is uproot? What is harvest? Uproot implies destroy.
Thank you.
Good for Adah.
Very good. So very good, Vlad. Here, what has to happen is he has to uproot it. Thank you. The malacha of uprooting, I'm just linking it with the problem with I'm not allowed to, we're not allowed to uproot anything on Cholamoyed Vlad unless you have a heter, because it's included in the isur of harvesting. It's koitzu. Very good. Okay, but the kalayim has to be uprooted. So it won't, even if you leave it there, it won't become usur. Why? Because it's not a davar ha'avut. So the Mara Fulda says, Afal Pikains, because it's Maras Ayin, no one knows these dinim of Cholamoyed so well. People don't understand. You owner, you got it back. It's not Yontif, it's only Cholamoyed. It looks like you don't care if it's there. So therefore, he tiru litzir b'moyin shalayu nira k'mekayim klai meken. Now I have a simple kasha, Danny. How can you say because of Maras Ayin, someone should be allowed to violate an Isur Doirais? The first answer of the Mara Fulda only works if you're going to learn, when we learned the whole sugya and moyed kater, that really doing the malachas on cholamoyed is allowed. It's the chachamim that says you can't do work unless you have the 5 atadim. So hey mamru hey mamru. It's the first answer of the Manafulda is clear. That's why he's writing it. It's if you hold that the isur of working cholamoyed is only midrabanan. Problem is, many hold that it's also doid isa. The Tur brings us down at the beginning. But now, so he says, inami im yira. That what? Shema Yosef Masayim b'moyed. He says, no. He says, if you don't uproot it on Cholamoyed, he says, and it's going to get a 200, then it will become a davar ha'avut. Afal gav da ha'anas liyasran, she'ein adam oisu davar she'ein sholai. Our whole mission was following that opinion as we just mentioned. We call Makayim, im oisifu Masayim la'achar shechazel l'bayla. If after the owner got it back, it was Moisef Masayim, Kidesh. So if you're going to go with that, then it's called a Davar Ha'avut. And that's why, and now, Midairaisa, you are allowed to do the work. Now, guys, getting workers to work for you on Cholamoyed is not so simple, because people normally do not work on Cholamoyed. So for them to go work, you have to pay them a premium. Now there's a new question. How much money do I have to pay extra to uproot it? Now, if I don't have workers, guys, I have to do it myself. But if there's a lot of kalayim there, maybe I don't have enough time. So says the Mishnah, how much do you have to pay as a premium? And how much do you don't have to pay? Can you say, I did my best? And the answer is Achlish. And Achlish, we'll see today in the Gemara, either a shlish of the schar. That means if the going rate of a day's work is 3 zuz, you pay them 4 zuz, but you don't have to pay more than 4 zuz, or up until the third of the value of that which you are uprooting. We'll see in the Gemara.
Shouldn't kavana be counted? Like it's your kavana to remove from the field.
Exactly.
Okay, so you can't get to it.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're saying. In other words, when I have kavana, if hiring workers are extra expensive, then it will not become kalayim blood, because you see that my intent is to uproot it. My intent, I'm doing the best I could. I don't have to break my bank. If it's a shlish or less, then if you have kavanah to uproot it, pay the premium. That's exactly the point. Yasin Mikain, but if it's more than a third, then the din is koitzer kedarkoi. The owner has to work on cholamayim. You have to harvest. And you do it, you don't run, do it the way you normally do it. You see, Vlad, the Mishnah says the words kaiser. And you're right, it's really uprooting, but you get rid of it, kidar, and even if it means that you won't finish to get rid of all of the kalayim, because it's so much that you only got rid of whatever it is, then afilu la'achar hamoyed. And that will not become kalayim, even if it added the 200, since you demonstrated that you don't want it to be there. You showed that. You are uprooting it. You didn't have enough time to get to it, then it's okay. Now, let's go back. Like we mentioned, that we spoke more of this in the introduction. Hold on. The whole thing is based on the rule that ein adam mekadosh davar she'ein shaloi. The whole thing is based on the rule that karke ein an exelis. Our sugya will hold it's not so simple. Because with the presumption that there is yush, and the only reason why yush doesn't work is because it didn't leave the domain of the owner, there is a halachic time where it leaves the domain of the owner. And once it left the domain of the owner, with yush, which we are presuming there will be there, then the anos will own it. And now if the anos doesn't uproot it, it will become kalayim, even though it's still under the dominion of the jimmy. The amos nikra anos. Here's the big Mishnah, Mishay Yishka, when the identity of the original owner becomes Sunken in the ground means forgotten. So this, guys, these are the two steps that you'll see in the Gemara. When the identity of the owner becomes forgotten, all of what that accomplishes is that now, yes, karka nigzelis. See, that's the chiddush, according to the Yerushalmi. Now, you can't say that it's still in the possession of the original owner. It's not. If there is yush, and the presumption is there'll be yush, now the yush will affect that it won't be his anymore. Whose will it be? The anosis, the robbers. So now that it's his, he's mekadosh davar shaloi. Now, when will it be? Yeah.
And maybe I'm mixing things up, but I remember, we've always learned that, let's say if I go into your field and I do improvements, you have to pay me for those improvements.
Either the shvach or the hoitzah.
That's right. So why wouldn't we say with this anos from day one, that stuff that he's planting is his? Why do we need any of this yish business?
First of all, he's planting something, Danny, that's detrimental. He's not adding to the value. He's destroying. He's planting kalayim. Fakert.
Right, but my wheat that I'm planting in that field, if I'm the anos, that's my wheat.
So, no, we don't say it that way. The land, it's not your wheat. That's for sure now. The question is, does the owner have to pay you if you plant wheat? He has to pay you. Either the hoitzah, it doesn't mean it's yours. Okay, now Zakti Gemara, Rabbi Bar Yaakov, Shem Rabbi Yechanan. I want you to know that the Keni Masnisa, what does the Mishnah, what's the chiddush of the Reish of the Mishnah? That muter lekoitzri afilu b'moyed. In other words, when you learn, guys, that you get it back in Chol Hamoed, and because of either Marasayin or because it is Davar Ha'avod, you harvest it on Chol Hamoed. So there's two ways of learning the Mishnah. It's not clear. One way is you're chayiv to harvest it. One way is not that you're chayiv. You are allowed to. Big difference. Now, one thing is clear, Chavre. If the original owner gets it back, not on Chol Hamoed, stam in the year, stam on mitvach, of course he's chayiv to uproot it, no doubt. Rabbi Yechanan is speaking about the case where he gets it back on Chol Hamoed. So when you learn the Mishnah before Rabbi Yechanan, you learn the Pshat, since it's a Davar Ha'avod, or Marasayin of Davar Ha'avod, Marasayin of Kalayim, so therefore there's a heter. Once there's a heter, you have to uproot it. It's Kalayim. Says no. Says that the Pshat of our Mishnah is only that muter l'koitzroi. Look inside the last Marah folder. Keina masnisa muter l'koitzroi, the masnisa mashma koitzroi, chayiv l'koitzroi. Without Rabbi Yechanan, you would understand. You have to. It's Kalayim. But kol hashmalon, ein chiyav ala muter hu. Why? Sharei ein adam oisod avoshen sholoi. We're going back to the first. Elo mishum marasayin itirolei l'koitzroi. Im yeitzim l'fanav b'moyed. Okay. And because of a maras ayin, it's amazing. It's for Chol Hamoed. You are allowed to.
So ktsira is uprooting? The Hebrew word ktsira is uprooting.
The malacha, yeah, that's what Vlad said. When we're learning the sugya of kalayim, we will use the word to uproot. But the problem of uprooting in the case of the Mishnah is because it's Chol Hamoed. The Chol Hamoed, there's lamates malachas unless you have heterim. Lamates malachas unless you have the 5 heterim. So the isur of uprooting vis-a-vis moyed is ksira. Yes. Okay, we'll leave it at that. That is now Zok the Gemara weiter. Daf Samach Yamad Beis. Gewaldige Gemara over here. Says the Gemara Akamol Noisan Lapoyalim. So the Mishnah says Achlish. So what's Achlish? So two machlekes. Rav Chuna, which is probably Rav Huna, and Rav Sheshes. Chad Amar Shlish L'Sachar. Shlish L'Sachar means that if the going rate of a day is 3, and you want to, not only are you doing it, but you want other people to help you, you pay them up until 4. More than that, you don't pay. I just want to point out that according to Rabbi Yechanan, that the whole thing is not that you're chayiv. It's a little bit hard to understand this, because why would you pay any premium? You're not chayiv to do it. Maybe. Once you're doing it, then you got to hire workers. Once you're showing that you are uprooting it, because you don't want to have a marasayan. Let's go to the first. You don't want to have marasayan. So if I would get it during the year, I would hire workers also. I wouldn't do it myself. You can't get it both ways. Either leave it. That's what Rabbi Yechanan is saying. You could opt to leave it. Once you're doing it, you got to do it to you and workers. Oh, okay. Shlish l'damim means, what are the value of the grapes and the grain? What's the value? I know that it's going to become Asr Bahana, but if not for the din of Kalayim, let's say it's worth $100. You have to pay up until 33.33 on workers to uproot it.
And what if it costs more than that to uproot it? Then what?
In other words, what
if it costs $50 to uproot it?
Once the price of the workers is eating up more than a shlish of its value, let's go with the Marasayin. People understand why you didn't get workers. Because Bechlal during the year, people say, why would I harvest things quickly when I'm losing too much money? No, the halach yelech will be that when you have to know the business of farming. I'm not a farmer. Like in certain businesses, you know that X amount of your profit could die to go on rent. X amount on workers. There's a system. Once you have more than a shlish of the value of the item that you are harvesting going to the worker, then a farmer would never hire workers. He would do it himself. It's not worth it. Like Kedai. Okay.
Rabbi, in all these cases, and this is just a general question that I'm maybe not remembering, does he have to uproot both the wheat and the vines, or can he just hire workers to uproot the wheat and then keep the vines?
Just the wheat. Okay. Absolutely. Because the vines are, this word I learned from the Gabbai, are residual. Why would you uproot the vines? You want to uproot the grain, much less.
But if there was growth of both of them together, wouldn't that render the vines climb, and then those would be?
Yes, it would. But now you're taking an action. You're taking an action which is demonstrating that you do not want with the kalayim. And even according to Rabbi Yechanan, you don't even have to take the action. You have to do it after Yom Tov. As long as you are demonstrating that you don't want for there to be kalayim, you don't even begin counting down the 200s. No, this Mishnah, what we're learning today, I forgot, we should have said it in the intro. It's Hilchas Chalamayit and Hilchas Karka and Yush, Karka and Exelos or Ein and Exelos. Now, the second case of the Mishnah was Be'emes HaNikra Anos Misha Yishka. So Amar Rav Acha, which means, I want you to know that if Nishtako Haba'al, if the identity of the owners did become dissociated from the land, people forgot that Reuven owned it. The loy nisyuashu habalim. Guys, I spent some time on this yesterday. These words mean not that we know he didn't have yush. Very important. These words mean that the owner did not express explicitly that he had yush. Very big difference. Repeat again. We're learning a sugya. There's a mahalach over here. For karka to be nixelis, which is the big exception, this is going to be a stand. Two things have to happen: that nishtaku shem haba'olim, and the owner needs to have yush. What our Gemara, what Rabbi Acha is saying, is that if the owner's identity became dissociated, it was forgotten, and the owner never said explicitly that I gave up hope, we assume he gave up hope. That's exactly his point. The time that it takes for there to be nishtaku haba'alim is a very long amount of time. And so it's such a long amount of time that even though he never said he has yush, nevertheless, we assume he had yush. And therefore, the anos becomes the owner. Mamash, and if the anos becomes an owner, then it's shaloim. Now you got an Isur Daraisa of Kalayim, Isuroi Devar Toira. Because since
the Anas is not getting old, because you would assume that it takes a generation for Adama to be forgotten, the yichus of the owner.
So it goes to the Anos's, it goes to the Anos's child. Or the Anos donated it to the Chabar house. Here we go. That's how he kashed his other genevas. Now, he thinks he kashed it. Okay. Oh. If the owner had huge, but and therefore what? And therefore, now Nisyashu Haba'alim means if he explicitly said, I am never getting it back. Now, since there's a rule, Yakir Karka Ein and Exelis, so the Anos doesn't own it. So really, Midoy Raisa, it will never become Kalayim. Nevertheless, Isura Midivreim. But the question is, why should it even be Asr Midrabanan? Why should it even be Asr Midrabanan? The Gemara is asking.
And also, why can we also assume karma?
One second. Hold your question. But you're saying it's also the Rabbanan. So now the Gemara is asking, the Yesh Karka Nixelis? No. If you don't have Nishtaku Haba'alim, so Karka is not Nixelis. If the Karka is not Nixelis, why do I even care if the owners explicitly said, oh, I'll never get it back? Even if they express their Yush, like we mentioned in the words of introduction, this is a big cloud, that Yush is never effective when the item is in the possession of the owner. Yush will do nothing. So why should it even be Yasam Rabbanan?
So the Shtako Abaylam is really the dominant
the dominant that makes here. That's the Chiddush, that makes it no longer in the possession of the owner. It's not in his domain. Amar Rabbi Lo, big Chiddush, exactly that Afal Pisha Ein Karken Exelis. And you're right, guys, that the owner, the Anas does not own it, not Midoy Raisa. The owner doesn't own it, not Midrabanan. It's not his. Nevertheless, when it comes to Kilei HaKerem, Achumra Midrabanan, we will say that if he said Yiyush, it will affect enough that the product now will become Asan Midrabanan from Kilei HaKerem. And we're going to call this Marasayin. Marasayin is good. People know the owner is saying, I'm never getting it back. So the owner already gave up hope to get it back. He gave up hope. The Anas, Jimmy has it. He planted grain in the vineyard. So the Chachamim says, Midrabanan, that's the Chiddush. Now, Yakir, what were you asking?
I don't have a question.
Okay. And now
Rabbi, can I ask you one question?
No.
In all these cases of Anas, are we talking about where the guy, Jimmy, actually stole the land?
Yeah.
Because I know in Rambam, we also learned the concept of a forced sale. Where I'm going to give you...
Yes. So, very good, Danny. We learned this, and we keep on learning this in the Rambam. The guys, remember the rule. When it comes to a sale, when it comes to an exchange, so the general rule is that once you agree to the sale, since the owner is getting something, he's getting money, then the sale is a sale. I know no one liked that. Big difference. Masha'enkein, if there's no payment. Very good. Yeah. Okay, now, says the Holy Mishnah, halacha hey. So now we're going back to the general rule. One of the three cases that Asr Umekadesh, Avodas HaKerem 6 Tvachim of a Gefen, Avodas HaGefen, Avodas HaKerem 4 Amos, and the third was one over the other. So like we mentioned, guys, when we spoke about the grapevine going over grain, no one cares what part of the grapevine is over the grain. Doesn't make a difference. It's for sure not going to be the trunk. The trunk is standing vertically on the ground. The tip of the vine is going over the grain, will also make a problem, Midoy Raisa. But now we're going to focus on the grain. That's the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah. Haruach she'il alos hagafonim al gabe yatfur. So the example that we're giving is that there is a grapevine. The grapevine cracked. The dafka cracked chebra means it's still attached. Don't forget, the moment the grapevine is not attached to the ground, I'm allowed to have a meal that mixes grapes and wheat. No problem. I can dip my challah inside the wine. No problem. The only issue of kalayim, and we never said these words, but it's obvious, is when the grain is connected to the ground and the grapevine is connected to the ground. Mishnah is giving a case where the vine cracked, and because of it, it got bent in a different position. And because of this new position that was done not by a person, It's not Adam Oyser Davar Shal Chaveira. Yeah, Oyser, not Oyser. Yeah, Mekadosh, not Mekadosh. The wind did it. A case in the Mishnah. So the wind cracked a grapevine. Now it's still connected. It's not broken off. It's only cracked. It's now leaning over grain. So Zolsto Wissen sein that Yigdar Miyad, you should immediately cut off the vines. Now, what we would have learned in the previous Mishnayos and what we learned was pull it back. We're not going to say pull it back, and this is just the Metzias. And again, we're going to confirm this, God willing, next Tuesday, when we go to a vineyard, that once the vine cracks, it will die. I mean, the two options, the practical options is just leave it the way it is. Once you have to
or cut the grain.
No, the grain leave. Then the grain, nothing happened to the grain. The grain is standing. Okay,
No,
I had a grapevine. I planted the grain 6 tefachim away. So the planting is kedasu kedin, and the vine was leaning over a different direction. Because of it being cracked, now it's going over the grain. So basically, the Mishnah says you got to remove it. In other words, on one hand, you can argue, since it's going to die anyways, I don't care anymore. We do care. If now it's still connected, now I care. So the Mishnah really would have said, just make sure it's not over the grain. We're being practical. Since it's going to die anyways, so Yigdar means
the moment it's disconnected, it's already dead.
So we're going to get about this. It's not dead enough. It's not dead enough for it not to create a problem.
I mean, it doesn't get nutrients, therefore it's
that's correct.
Dead.
But still, that's the whole part of the Mishnah. Everything.
But isn't it that we learned yesterday that even fully dead is still a problem?
No.
He's talking about dried out. Dried out. We learned about
dried out. Correct. Now it's not dried out yet. It's correct. Very good. And by the way, by Yofsha, right? The Gemara says it's a machlokes between Ameir and the Chachamim, and it has to do with Marasayim. Let's go back there. Marasayim. You're right. Dried out is really not a problem. Here it's not dried out. Now, in other words, if you were unable to break it off because you were unable to get there, mutter. Same idea. That here you are not planting. By planting, it's asur miyad. By mekayim, you didn't plant it that way. It cracked by the wind. Whenever the issue is not planting, it's that you are maintaining it. Number one, you have to be aware. Number two, you have to be negligent. Your negligence then begins the countdown of the 1/200ths. Here you're not negligent. Here you couldn't get there. It's oinus motamiyat. Now, next case, you have a standing grain, and the wind is blowing the tip of the grain. Now that it's growing, the tip of the grain becomes a little bit tall. So it's leaning now under the grapevine. The tip, not the stalk, the tip. And so says the Mishnah, all you need to do is machazir. All you need to do is move it away. We don't want it to be there. But if you didn't move it away, because only when the primary part of the plant, which is the stalk, is beneath the grapevine, any part of the grapevine, that's when you have a problem. Here, that's not what happened. I want to finish. We have another minute. I know it's over the minute. So now, says the Mishnah, the Emasai Tvua Miskadeshes, there has to be a point. You know what? Let's stop over here. It doesn't matter. We'll stop over here. We'll continue the Mishnah tomorrow because it's